Hello and welcome to this special segment in CNBC TV 18. Global trade is at a crossroads. On one hand, we are seeing exports and imports at its lowest level since the 2009 financial crisis. And on the other hand, we are seeing developed nations becoming protectionist. What does it mean for the multilateral trade process? What does it mean for global trade flows? We are now being joined by Director General of the World Trade Organization, Roberto Azevedo, to talk to us about many of these issues. Thank you so much for joining us at CNBC TV 18. Let me straight away start by asking you about an initiative which has got traction at the WTO, and that is to have a sort of a global standards for the e-commerce sector. You have met e-commerce companies here in Delhi. What was the feedback that you got from them regarding this idea?
I think in Geneva the conversations are still starting on electronic commerce. We have already 11 papers on the table. They go in different directions. At this point in time, people are still trying to figure out how that conversation could evolve or should evolve. So it's in the early stages. And that's good because when I was in the event yesterday with the ICC, the representatives of the private sector, they showed a lot of interest in this issue, asked a lot of questions, and I told them what was happening in Geneva, which is the conversation is still shaping up. They had very different ideas, very different notions about what could be done, what should be done. The interaction between that and services, for example, was stressed. But it was clear to me that the digital sector is picking up very quickly. In India, it's growing fast, and the interest in this issue is quite significant.
So, in India, as you rightly said, we are an aspiring digital economy. A lot of e-commerce companies here in India. But at the same time, one of the basic ingredients of a digital economy is internet penetration. Now, in emerging economies, that's very low. In India, for example, just 1/5 of the population is covered by internet. So, do you think that this is the right time to actually, go or push for a global deal on e-commerce, or should we wait for some more time till internet penetration increases, especially in emerging economies?
I think this conversation has to be gradual. And clearly one of the key elements of this conversation is connectivity. Particularly in the developing world, there is a much lower degree of interconnectivity. And I think that's something that we have to help developing countries, in particular the least developed countries, to integrate more, to interconnect more. And that goes through soft infrastructure, so institutional capacity to do that, but also hard infrastructure, which is something that the WTO doesn't do, but there are agencies that we can partner up and try to help to develop programs that will make a more robust telecommunications and internet facilities in these countries. So we have to go slowly. But I suppose that many members in the WTO feel that you don't have to wait until the whole world is integrated before you begin to talk about this, because this is precisely in the early stages that you begin to harmonize what people do, so that you avoid the proliferation of norms and standards that will be making the connectivity more difficult and more costly.
Okay. So as far as the digital economy is concerned, in India, the e-commerce companies are spread across a diverse range of sectors, and they have different takes on how this dialogue on e-commerce and having a digital economy should be propagated. What is the sense that you got from the companies that you spoke to regarding the e-commerce space in India, and how does having an e-commerce common standard globally help the cause of trade?
I think one of the big benefits of interconnectivity and a stronger platform for e-commerce is that it makes it easier for the smaller businesses, for the small and medium enterprises to participate in trade flows. Also because it shortens the distance between the producer and the consumer, and it makes things more easy, faster, and less costly. So it is an overall gain. But the diversity of interests, for example, the big platforms, social media companies, e-commerce companies, they have different interests, they have different views about what needs to be done, what the priorities are, and this diversity is not happening only here in India, everywhere you go, these different views, these different approaches, these different expectations exist. It is a matter of talking to each other. I don't think it's only an issue of governments talk to themselves and exchanging views. It's also the private sector, the different sectors of the private sector talking to themselves. Logistics companies, for example, insurance companies, the financial sector for e-payments, for example, e-commerce companies, social media companies, they all have to be talking to themselves and establishing priorities and the areas where more harmonization would be useful for everyone, where we're looking at an enabling kind of conversation, not a monitoring or regulatory kind of conversation.
Right. Okay. Let me now try to get some sense from you regarding two policy initiatives which India had undertaken, and let me start with one initiative which was partly directed at promoting the digital economy. What we wanted to understand from you is, recently India carried out a demonetization exercise. Does such policy moves disrupt, or does it actually enable the setting up of a digital economy? Does it actually help people move into the digital economy?
I think it helps to move into the digital economy, especially the conversation on demonetization, which essentially what it does is it formalizes the economy and it simplifies the way that operators do business and how the consumers interact in that scenario. So I think it's a very welcome initiative. I already had a few conversations. I'm not familiar with the details of the program, but what I have heard so far impressed me with the kind of vision that is out there, and I think it would be a big step forward.
So in the long run, do you think that as far as trade is concerned, perhaps it will also help in formalizing mechanisms and channels of trade?
Absolutely, absolutely. Trade is all about interconnectivity of governments, of peoples, of cultures. And the easier it is for people to make transactions, even at home, domestically, in different and more remote areas of the country, that platform is the same platform that will enable connectivity globally. So yeah, absolutely, that's the way to go.
Right. The second comment that we wanted to understand from you is regarding the goods and services tax which India is proposing. Now, the dialogue is almost complete now. But do you think that having a single tax across different sectors of goods and services, will it add competitiveness to the Indian exports and exporters?
I think the Indian government's a better place to answer this question than I am. What I have seen from the debate seems to be that the intent of the measure is to simplify the collection of taxes and make things easier for businesses to conduct their operations. And if that's the goal, and if it lowers the cost of doing business and increases competitivity, I think there would be no reason to have reservations about any of that.
Right. Let me talk to you about another initiative which is gaining traction at WTO, and that is the dialogue on having investment-related standards or global deal on investments under the WTO umbrella. Now, developing countries and emerging economies like India believe that there should be a bilateral approach to such deals on investments. But at the same time, you have another camp of developed countries which actually seek to establish a multilateral system on investments. As a proponent of free trade and movement of people, where do you see the merit in this dialogue?
Let's be careful. There are many different types of conversations on investments. You put all of them in one question. People are talking about, some people talk about protection of investments.
Yes.
Others are talking about solving disputes between investors and the state and things like that, which are also connected to the protection of the investment. In the WTO, there is a conversation that is ongoing now, which is mostly about the facilitation of investments. It's how to make the environment more user-friendly for the investors so that you can attract investment and facilitate the work of the investor. Also, maybe including the investors in the conversation, for example, with corporate responsibility towards the host country. So all of this has to be sorted out before we begin to talk and put everything in the same basket. These are very, very different conversations. At this point in time in Geneva, they're talking mostly about facilitation of investments. There are other conversations about protection and investor-state dispute. That is ongoing as well. But it's a different track. These are different things, and we shouldn't confuse them.
Right. Okay. Let me talk to you about another deal which India is proposing, and this is to facilitate services. Given the fact that several global economies are now looking inwards as far as movement of professionals are concerned, do you think this idea will gain traction at Geneva?
It depends on how it is presented and the ambition of the proposal and the environment that exists at that point in time. It is a fair and legitimate concern. In the whole conversation of Geneva on services, of the 4 types of supply of services that we have, one of them is movement of people. It's the services provider moving to some other country and providing the service there. Now, that's one thing. That's a contract. That's something that is envisaged in the rules. It's very different from migration.
Yes.
Migration is something completely different. It has nothing to do with the provision of services, and that's part of the conversation and the tensions that you see globally. I think to the extent that you can differentiate the two things, it will help.
I'll get more on this topic later, but before that, I just wanted to have a sense of the 11th ministerial, which is scheduled in December. Do you see these different tracks merging into one global deal? Of course, the Doha round talks are on, but at the same time on e-commerce or on investments or on a trade facilitation a pact on services. Do you see all these happening during this year itself, or perhaps more dialogue?
It's very difficult to tell. One thing that I think is clear is that among the WTO members there is well, certainly a vast majority of members who think that we should be pragmatic, that we should be moving along as we can and go for what we can reach. I think any attempt of trying to make a big package, bundling everything together, it makes things more difficult, more costly, and less productive. I think the tendency, and it's, after all, it's the members who will decide how they will do it. But I think the tendency in the WTO today is to harvest by the next ministerial conference whatever things are ripe for harvesting. So we have to see which conversations get traction, which conversations mature enough so that we can collect at that point in time. And even then, no matter in which area you collect and harvest things, it doesn't mean that that's the end of the road for that subject. So the conversation may continue. This is an ongoing process. This is not a one-shot deal.
On that note, we will take a short break. Stay tuned.